So hello, students. On this lecture, I want to focus on several things that you need to know in the retail setting. The two biggest ones is partials and loaners. And we're also going to talk about transfer of medications and some other miscellaneous items. So without further ado, what I like to focus on is partials and loaners. But before we get to that, I want to talk to you about the rules of transfer of medications. So transfer of medications is simply as it sounds. There may be times where customers are in one city and they normally get their medication at a location that's close to their home. And since they're a little bit away from their home, they want to transfer the medication to either another pharmacy or a pharmacy in the same chain. A pharmacy in the same chain would be going from CVS to CVS, Walgreens to Walgreens, versus transferring a prescription from a pharmacy like CVS to a competitor like Walgreens, or from Walgreens to a Kroger pharmacy. That's considered a competitor transfer. Again, same chain, is just keeping it within the same company. So CVS in Plano to a CVS in Mesquite, a Walgreens in Garland to a Walgreens in Fort Worth, and so on. The only time where this actually gets a little tricky is when you transfer control medications. So the first thing I want to talk about is transferring of non-control medications. So this is anything that's not a control medication. So remember, you have control medications. Usually there's C2, C3, C4s, and C5s. Next class of medication is your non-control medication. That's just basically anything else that's not a controlled substance. And also you have the over-the-counter. So for example, if a medication is a non-controlled medication with refills remaining, you may transfer the medication to any pharmacy of your choosing, whether it's the same chain or whether it's a competitor. So really there's no strict rules of transferring non-controlled medications, whether it's a competitor or the same chain. You just transfer it to any location you want, assuming it has refills. It gets a little tricky when the medication is a C3, C4, or C5, and it has refills remaining. If that's the case, if it's the same chain and it's a controlled medication, like you're going from CVS to CVS, and assuming the medication is not too soon to fill, you can transfer it back and forth for as many refills remaining if it's the same chain. So if you're going from CVS to CVS or Walgreens to Walgreens, whether it's a non-controlled medication or a controlled medication, and it has refills remaining, you can go back and forth. You can transfer those medications back and forth if it's the same chain, as long as it has refills remaining. It becomes strict and different. The rules change when you have a controlled medication and you want to go from one chain to a competitor. So this would be transferring a medication from CVS to Walgreens. If it's a controlled medication and you originally had it filled at a CVS, and for whatever reason you want to transfer the remaining refills to a Walgreens or a Kroger, it's just a different competitor, you can only transfer it one time to that competitor, and the refills must remain at that specific location. So for example, if you transfer a medication from CVS in Plano, just say CVS on Plano Road, and you want to transfer it to a Walgreens, let's say on Main Street, and assuming it has refills remaining, once you transfer it to that Walgreens on Main Street, it must remain at the Walgreens on Main Street. You must pick up all the remaining refills at that specific location on Main Street. You can't transfer it any further. So the big rule is, if you have a controlled medication and you go from one company to a competitor, once you transfer it to that competitor, it must remain, you must pick up the remaining refills at that specific location. This is important when people actually travel. And I gave you a little example at the bottom. So let's say a person living in New York that uses Walgreens is on a business trip to Dallas. He happens to know that he left his Valium, or he left a controlled substance back at home, and he wants to transfer that medication from the Walgreens he uses at home to a CVS. And let's just say he's at a business meeting, and the hotel he stays at right across the street is a CVS. So he says, oh, goodness, I left my medication in New York, but there's a CVS across the street, so I'll just travel over there and transfer my medication to the CVS, and everything will be great. Actually, everything won't be great. He can transfer that medication, but remember, it's a controlled substance. He originally got it filled at the Walgreens. Now he's in Dallas, Texas, at a CVS, which is a competitor. So if he transfers his medication to that CVS across the street from the hotel in Dallas, all the remaining refills must be picked up at that CVS. So that's going to be a problem when he returns home to New York, because he's just in town visiting. So the best thing to do is, when you have controlled medications, transfer it to the same chain. So if your original prescriptions is at a Walgreens and you travel out of town, you want to find a Walgreens in the town that you are to transfer the remaining refills. Because if he transfers it to the Walgreens in Dallas, when he goes back to New York, he can transfer it back to a Walgreens in Dallas. Because remember, if you use the same chain and you have controlled substance, you can go back and forth. But when you have a different competitor and it's a controlled medication, it must stay at that same location. So just make sure you remember that that rule. So the big tricky rule is, if you got a controlled substance and you want to transfer it, if you transfer it to a competitor, it must stay at that location that you transfer for the remaining refills. Next thing I want to talk about is what is the issue of partial fills and loaning medications. So there's two situations where you may not have enough medication to fill a prescription, and you have to actually partial it, and there's some rules that you have to follow. And also there's another scenario where a person is out of a medication and they may fall into a situation where you can actually loan them medications, but I'm gonna go over the criteria that's required to do either or. But before I go into that, I just want to talk about a simple process that mail order pharmacies use, and it's called a bridge supply. So a bridge supply is an insurance term that comes into play when a pharmacy has a person who uses mail order. Not sure if Professor Misty Henderson Curran went over the process of a mail order or talked about a mail order. A mail order is basically a method of getting prescriptions, but instead of going to your pharmacy, it gets delivered to you by your insurance company. And typically the advantage is you get a 90-day supply for the price of a 60-day supply. So normally if you were going into a retail pharmacy and you were getting your prescriptions for 90 days, you would be paying the equivalent of 3 copays, because that adds up to 1 copay per month, which is 90 days. In mail order, they entice you to go mail order, where you get your prescriptions delivered to you at 90-day supplies. But the advantage is it's a little bit cheaper because they only charge you for 2 copays. So remember, if you were going to a retail pharmacy for 3 months, each month that you go, you'll be paying a copay. So let's say, for example, your copay is $20. So if you were picking up a prescription this month, which is November, you would pay a $20 copay. Next month, which is December, you pay a $20 copay. Then the third month, which will be January, you'll pay another copay. So that's 20 in November, 20 in December, 20 in January. So that's a total of $60. Mail order is a little different. You get a cheaper price. So if you were getting a prescription delivered to you in mail order, it'll be a 90-day supply. So you'll get November's prescription, December, and January, but you would only pay $40. They usually give you the third month at no cost. So that's the way of helping the customer save some money if you go mail order. But sometimes with mail order, as the name sounds, the prescription gets delivered via FedEx, UPS, or just a regular postal service. And sometimes they're not always on time. So in these situations, if a person was supposed to get their prescription today and they're out of medication, and for whatever reason, FedEx or the postal service didn't deliver the medication today, the customer will call the mail order company and tell them that, hey, my medication was supposed to arrive today, but nothing was in the mail. The post office already did their deliveries and I am out of medication and I need to take my medication. What the mail order will actually do is they'll ask the customer, what is the closest pharmacy to you? And they give them a location. Then the mail order company will actually, insurance company will actually call that particular pharmacy. And if you're the tech, you can do all this information. They'll ask first if you have the medication in stock. And if you do, the mail order representative will tell you that they're going to send over a bridge supply. That's the name they use. And basically what it is usually a 3-day, or sometimes some situations it's a 5-day supply, but normally it's a 3-day supply of the prescription, and it's basically used as a holdover until the person receives their medication in the mail. So it's usually a 3-day supply of the medication. And what they simply will do is once they confirm that you have the medication in stock, they will tell you that they're going to fax you over a prescription with all the information, and the prescription will be only for a 3-day supply. Once they fax it over, or they could e-scribe it too, it will have all the information that you need. So it's really easy to fill out. It'll have all the prescribing doctor's information, all the insurance information that you'll put in, and you'll bill it for a 3-day supply. Usually the mail order company will check back and see if the prescription has been filled. And if it has been filled or it hasn't been filled, they'll ask you what's the time the customer can actually pick up the medication. Once you give them that time, the mail order company will actually call the customer back and said, the pharmacy will have your medication ready at this specific time. And the customer just shows up at the pharmacy and picks up the medication. So remember, it's only like a 3-day supply, just a holdover until the prescription actually comes in the mail. And it's always a zero copay. So it's called a bridge supply. Very simple. Okay, so now the first thing I want to talk about is loaners. So in Texas, you may loan on a medication if the tech or the pharmacist feels that there will be more harm than good if the person is without their medication. So again, this usually happens when, especially on Friday evenings, a person comes to the pharmacy for a refill on their medication. Well, they don't have any refills remaining and they need authorization from the doctor. So if it's Friday, normally you won't hear back from the doctor until Monday. So the person says, well, I don't have any medications for today, tomorrow, or Sunday, and I need my blood pressure or my thyroid medication. So could I get some loaners until the doctor responds back? Now, this is where the technician comes in hand, and most of the decisions are made right at this point by the technician, because usually they'll know what to do and what not to do. But there's some specific rules that must be applied to each situation, and the rules must be followed and documented. So the first thing I want you to know is in order to loan on a medication, the first rule is the patient must be on what is termed a maintenance medication. So by definition, a maintenance medication is a medication a person must take every single day. And if the person does not take this medication every single day, it could disrupt their medical condition. So these are some examples of maintenance medication is diabetes medication, hypertension or blood pressure medication, thyroid medication, definitely antidepressants and antipsychotic medications, Lipid medications are medications that control your cholesterol, seizure medication, immune and chemo drugs. Immune medication would be like your HIV medications, and of course, chemo drugs or drugs to fight cancer. I have asthma inhalers, and I have a little asterisk next to it because I'm going to explain that a little later on. But not every medication that you take every single day is a maintenance medication. And if it's not a maintenance medication, it's usually a lifestyle or as needed medication. So here, erectile medications like Viagra, if a person runs out of Viagra medications and they want some loners, that's not going to work because erectile medications are a lifestyle medication. They're not maintenance medication. No one's going to be in any bad physical shape or condition if the guy does not have his Viagra medication. Yes, his girlfriend or significant other may be a little upset, but he's not going to be rushed to the hospital, or he's not going to go into any kind of physical impairment if he does not have his erectile medication. The same thing works for birth control. Birth control, even though ladies take it every day, it's not what they consider a maintenance medication. If a woman is not taking her birth control, um, she's not going to get sick or get rushed to the hospital or anything like that. But that could happen with your diabetes medication if you start missing doses. Your blood sugar could go really high. Same thing with your blood pressure medication. If you miss a few days, your blood pressure can get really high and you can get really sick. So you got to first know that if it's a maintenance medication. If you're unsure, you want to ask the pharmacist whether this medication is maintenance or not, and the pharmacist will tell you. The second rule, which is important or just as important, is the word compliance. This is probably the more important of the two. Once you have established that the medication is a maintenance med, you must then look at their medical history by looking at their profile in the computer, and the person must show compliance. Compliance by definition, the pharmacy records must show that the person continuously filling that medication month after month with no interruption. So if a person is compliant, you should see that they're taking their medication month after month, they're getting refills. You're not compliant if you have blood pressure medication and it's November, and the last time your records show is the person had it in June or July, and they skipped August, September, and October. That way, that is basically showing that the person is not being compliant because they're not taking it the way the doctor has prescribed the medication. Usually with blood pressure medication, cholesterol medication, HIV medication, you take it every single day. You don't take it whenever you want to, or you don't skip weeks and start back. So you have to show that the patient's compliant. An example I give is if John Doe needs loaner on a blood pressure medication, and your records show the last time he had it filled was January of this year, by law, he's not entitled to get a loaner because he's not compliant. He has missed roughly 9 or 10 months of the medication, so you can't give him loaners in that situation because he's not compliant. So the two things you have to look for is maintenance medication. So those are medications designed to be taken every single day to treat a medical condition. Again, if you're not sure if the medication is maintenance, just ask the pharmacist. And then you have to show, once you find out that the medication is a maintenance medication, you have to indicate whether the person has been compliant with the medication. Now, sometimes they may use different pharmacies. Your records may show the last time they had this medication was in June or July. But if they say, oh, in August, September, and October, I used this other pharmacy, they have to show you some kind of documentation. They have to show you an old prescription bottle or something. Or if that pharmacy is open, you got to call and verify, okay? So rules for loaners continue. Normally, if a person missed 1 month of therapy or more, they are deemed not compliant. Once you have determined compliance and that the medication is a maintenance medication, the law allows you to give a one-time 72-hour or 3-day supply, same thing, of the medication. It's good advice to inform the patient that they either must follow up with the doctor and no further loaners can be provided. This is assuming that the pharmacy has faxed and or called the doctor several times. So once you fax the prescription to the doctor's office, you have completed your job. The doctor should get the fax or the refill request Monday morning, and it's up to the doctor's office to fax back the approval or the denial. Okay, because the pharmacy have completed that part by faxing over the refill request. Now it's up to the doctor's office to approve it or not. Also, if a doctor has denied a refill request, technically by law, you're not supposed to loan out any medication. So what happens sometimes is you may send in a refill request to the doctor's office on a blood pressure medication, and the doctor may fax back or call back and deny the refill request. And usually the reason why they deny it is perhaps the person hasn't made an appointment in a while. The doctor hasn't seen the patient in a while, and the doctor denies it, saying the person needs to make an appointment. So when the person comes to the pharmacy and you as a technician tell them that the doctor has denied your refill request because they want to see you, the person may say, okay, no problem, I'll make an appointment, but can I get some loaners until I can make an appointment with the doctor? Technically, by law, once the doctor has denied the medication, you are not to give any loaners for any reason until that person has met with the doctor. Once you have decided to loan the 3-day supply, the tech must verify the contents of the medication with the pharmacist. Again, in most situations, the tech usually decides that the patient gets loaners, but you must always show the pharmacist what pills the person is receiving. So it simply works this way. Sometimes a person has the bottle with them and they give you the empty bottle and you just type in the prescription number and you find out they have no refills remaining, and you electronically fax the doctor's office. Then the patient will say, oh, can I get some loaners on that because I'm out of medication? Now, if you check the computer and you find out that the person's been compliant, and you also find out that the medication is a maintenance medication, you are okay to give a 3-day supply. And keep in mind, you give a 3-day supply of however they are taking the medication. So it's not always necessarily 3 pills, because the patient could be taking 1 pill twice a day. So in this situation, you would give them 6 pills. If they were taking it once a day, then you would loan them 3 pills. So once you find out that the person's been compliant and it's a maintenance medication, you as a technician will go and retrieve that medication. You will put a 3-day supply in that bottle, but before you hand it to the patient, you will check with the pharmacist. You will show the pharmacist what loaners you're giving to the patient, because the pharmacist still has to make sure that you're putting the correct medication in the bottle. So simply the tech will go over to the pharmacist and say, I'm giving Mr. PA a 3-day loaner on his blood pressure medication. I already checked, it's a maintenance medication and he's been compliant. The pharmacist is going to always assume that you know the check to see if it's a maintenance medication and see if the patient's being compliant. So you show the pharmacist the bottle with the loaners. The pharmacist verifies that the prescription is that the loaners are the correct medication. Then you hand it to the patient. And just FYI, if the medication gets approved, and let's say the patient was taking once a day, they were taking the medication once a day for a quantity of 30. If the medication gets approved, the patient will then get 27 pills because you loaned them 3 pills. So the computer keeps up with that. So you're going to, whatever loaners you loan the patient, when the medication gets authorized, the refills or the loaners get subtracted from the original fill. So the loaners are technically not free, okay? It gets subtracted once the doctor approves the medication. Special loaners. Now, there's a situation where if a person has an inhaler, and these are some of the common inhalers: Xopenex, Provento, and ProAir, as well as albuterol. They all the same family. They are considered maintenance meds because the patient has to take that medication every single day. Usually they're having some kind of asthma attack. However, you can't partial an inhaler. I don't know if any of you seen what an inhaler looks like, but just Google Prevento or ProAir or albuterol inhaler, and they'll show you a picture of one. Um, it's just a little breathable apparatus, and it has a little canister, but you can't partial it. You would have to dispense uh, the whole inhaler. So when it comes to an inhaler, if a patient is out of refills and you fax the doctor and it's a Friday evening and you know you're not going to hear back from the doctor until Monday, assuming the person has been complaining, and most people are complaining with inhalers, they get them every month. What you would have to do in this situation is inhalers have a special rule. If the tech or pharmacist deems it necessary, the law allows the pharmacist to document and fill a one-time emergency prescription and to contact the doctor's office to inform the doctor of the emergency fill. So in this case, since you can't partial an inhaler, the pharmacist will take out their telephone prescription pad and write an emergency fill, and dispense that medication to the customer and notify the doctor. But the pharmacist will notify the customer that this is a one-time per year thing. They can't do this every single month. Okay. So inhalers have a special rule where once a year, if the person happens to run out of refills, they can get an emergency fill of that inhaler, but it can only be done once a year. Loaning controls. Okay, I kind of want you to know this. On the PTCB, if they ever ask you, can you loan on controlled substance that are C3s, C4s, or C5s, there are some controlled substance that are maintenance medication. Like, for example, phenobarbital is a seizure medication, but it happens to be a C4. But with seizure medications, you take those every single day. And sometimes people will run out of their seizure medication and they need refills. And by law, you can loan on a C3, C4, or C5 if they taken it as a maintenance medication. But I will tell you, in a real world setting, that most pharmacists or techs will not loan on a controlled medication for inventory reason, because controlled medications have to be carefully kept up with as far as security reasons and inventory reasons. So usually 9 out of 10 times on a controlled medication, most techs or pharmacists will not loan on those medications. They would just tell the customer, oh, I'm sorry, I can't loan on this medication because it's a controlled substance. Just wherever you work, just check with your pharmacist on their rules for that or their protocol, because most places, most pharmacists will not loan on those medications. And technically, loaning is a courtesy. We don't have to do it. It's just a courtesy thing that we do. And again, by law, you can loan on a C3, C4, or C5, but most pharmacists or techs will not loan on a controlled substance. C2s can never, ever be loaned under any situation. Don't even think about it. So C2s are never loaned, so you don't have to worry about that. So basically on a PTCB, if this question comes up, can you loan on a C3, C4, or C5? Technically, the answer is yes. But in a real world setting, most pharmacists and most techs won't loan on those medications. The next thing is that I want you to know about is partial fills. So this is slightly different. So this is more of an inventory issue. So when a pharmacy doesn't have the full amount of a medication, the amount dispensed is given the term partial fill. So this is when, for example, a doctor writes for 30 tabs of a medication to be taken once a day. but your pharmacy doesn't have 30 pills to dispense. Maybe they only have 15 tablets. So the example I give is a prescription for Lipitor 20 milligram quantity of 30 tabs is needed. You only have 15 tabs on the shelf, so you don't have enough for 30. You would then partial the medication for 3 pills and inform the customer that they will be getting a partial fill and the remainder will be in on the date you give them. The date should be before the 3-day supply runs out. In most cases, it takes 24 to 48 hours to order a medication. So the first thing you want to ask the patient is, or you want to inform the patient that you don't have the full quantity. You want to check and make sure that they are okay with receiving a partial prescription, which is a 3-day supply, and letting them know that they'll order the remaining quantity, which they can pick up on the 3rd day. Now, typically, the best thing to do is if you give them a 3-day supply, you tell them to come back on the 3rd day because that gives you and the pharmacy extra time to fill the prescription. No need to tell them to come back tomorrow, even though you're going to order the medication and get it in tomorrow. The best thing to do is give yourself and the pharmacy as much time as possible to get that medication ready. And since they have a 3-day supply, no need to come back tomorrow when they have a 3-day supply. So you tell them to come back on the 3rd day, the day they take the last fill. It just gives the whole pharmacy more time to fill the prescription. So that's called a partial fill. It's always 3 days, just like loaners, 3 days, 72 hours. You give them a 3-day supply of whatever the medication is. This is just FYI. By law, you can't bill a third party for a partial fill. Most computer systems are set up where you can't even do it if you wanted to do it because it's considered insurance fraud. And what I mean by bill a third party, if a person's copay is normally $20 and you have to partial a prescription, meaning you give them partial amount until they get the remaining quantity in, you can't charge them for the 3 pills. You can't charge them for a partial prescription. They have to pay when they get the remaining full quantity in. So in situations where they get partials, it's always 0 copays. At one time, a tech could work around the situation where they could charge the customer for the partial. But since that's considered insurance fraud to charge a customer for a partial fill, the computers are set up where you can't bill the insurance company until you get the remaining quantity in. Once you get the remaining full quantity in, then the person pays. Now, there's a rare situation where you have it where doctors are writing for 90-day supplies. And in this situation, where doctors write for 90-day supplies, you have a situation, and the situation I give is with a medication called Advair. Advair is a medication that's shaped like a disc. It's used for asthma, but it's used for chronic asthma. And basically, the medication, the way it's actually designed, they call it a disc. One inhaler lasts 30 days. So let's say, for example, your pharmacy has, the doctor writes for a 90-day supply, which are 3 discs, 1 for each month. But your pharmacy only has 2 in stock and not 3 that the doctor has prescribed. And the prescription is written for 3. So what do you do in that situation? Because if you give them 2 as a partial, that lasts 60 days. And remember, you can't charge them or collect money until you get the full amount in. Even if you give them 1 discus, that lasts 30 days. And you're thinking to yourself, well, what if the patient doesn't come back and pick this up? Because this is different from the tablets, which you give them a 3-day supply. If you give them 1 discus, that lasts 30 days, they might not come back. Well, here's the solution. You first may ask the customer if they can wait until the next day where they can get all 3. So this is a scenario where the doctor is writing for a 90-day supply, which is 3 discus. Each discus lasts 30 days. And you may ask the patient, can they wait till tomorrow where you can have all three in stock because you currently only have two and the prescription is written for three. Well, some situations, in most situations, the person will say, yes, I can wait till tomorrow or three. But there's some rare situations where the patient might say, well, the doctor told me I really needed to start on this medication today, so I really need at least one to get started because the doctor says my asthma is really bad. Advair is used for people who have chronic asthma. So let's assume the person really needs at least one. So now you're in a situation where you have to partial at least one of those discus. And when you do that, you're still going to tell the patient that you'll get the remaining in tomorrow or within 3 days, because the law says you need to get the partial quantity within 72 hours. So now keep in mind that that one discus lasts 30 days. So what happens if the person intentionally or unintentionally does not return to pick up the remainder and you had given them an inhaler at no charge? So remember, if you partial an Advair discus, it lasts 30 days and they're pretty pricey, but you can't charge them for a partial. So what do? Your next step is to simply and politely contact the customer. That's when you get the remainder in. If that fails, so just say you contact the patient, they never come back and get the remaining two, even though you have partial on one at no cost. What you simply do is bill the insurance company for the amount that the person picked up. So in this case, one discus inhaler. The pharmacy will lose out on the copay at the register because you can never collect money on a partial, but they will still get paid by the insurance company for the actual product that they dispense. By no means do you ever call the patient up and threaten them or threaten to call the police or put anything on social media that this person has gotten this medication for free and they're not a good person. You don't do anything like that. You just simply bill the insurance company for the partial that they picked up. So the insurance company will actually pay for the medication, but the pharmacy will lose out on the copay, but the medication will always be more than the copay anyway. So that's how you handle that. And there's a couple of other terms I want you to be familiar with. OOS stands for out of stock. This is the term used when you don't have any of the medication at all, not even one pill to partial. So this is when you just don't have the drug at all. We use the term out of stock. So this is when you have to actually order via inventory. You have to update your inventory to order the product completely. The best protocol to do normally in that situation that most pharmacies follow, if a person has a medication and you're completely out of stock, the obvious thing to do is tell the person you order it and it'll be in tomorrow. But sometimes that patient can't wait. Your next option would be to find a sister store. When we use the term sister store, we mean a store that's nearby that's in the same chain. So if this is CVS, a sister store would be a store closest to the location that you're at to see if they have it in stock. Because if they do, then you can transfer that prescription to that pharmacy and have the patient pick it up there, assuming that it's close to the location where you're at now. You don't want to be in Dallas and call a store in Fort Worth unless the person works out in Fort Worth. But the person doesn't work anywhere near Fort Worth, it's pointless to call a Fort Worth store because most people are not going to travel an hour to go to that location. So just be familiar with that term. The next term I want you to be familiar with is called the waiting bin. Now, if any of you ever been to a pharmacy to pick up a medication, whether it's for yourself, a child, or a parent, or anything like that, when you're at the register and you enter your information, the technician at the register, at the pickup register, will ask you, well, what's the name and the date of birth. Sometimes they'll ask for the address if the name is common. Once they locate your prescription, the area where they turn around and actually retrieve the medication to grab it and bring it to the register to ring you up, that area is called the waiting bin. So the waiting bin by name means prescriptions waiting to be picked up by the customer. Those are all the medications that have been verified by the pharmacist and billed to the insurance company. Two things I want you to know about that. So I want you to know what the area is called. So again, it's called the waiting area. Medications waiting to be picked up. And usually it's the area right behind the cashier or the cash registers, right where the person turns around and retrieves the medication. Um, I want you to know that the most or the longest you can hold that medication in the waiting bin is 14 days or 2 weeks. Once it passes 14 days, you have to return that medication or you have to return it to stock and reverse it back out. The way the process works is this: assuming the person has insurance, once you type in a prescription and you bill the insurance company, and then the insurance company sends a copay back, the insurance company also pays the pharmacy for that medication. It's just done electronically, where the pharmacist or the technician doesn't see it. Is done by corporate. So the insurance company pays the pharmacy right when it's billed to them. The insurance company is assuming the person is going to pick up the medication and pay their copay, and the transaction is completed. But believe it or not, I believe it's 2 out of every 5 prescriptions filled is never picked up by the customer. And there's various reasons. Actually, I think it may be 3 out of 5, but don't hold me to that. But it's at least 2 out of every 5 prescriptions um, is never picked up by the customer. And it's for various reasons. It could be the prescription was too expensive, the patient decided they didn't need it anymore, or the patient just simply forgot that they had the prescription there. A lot of different reasons. Anyway, the most you can hold it there is 14 days. After the 14th day, when you get to the 15th day, if the person hasn't picked up their prescription and it's been billed to the insurance company, the pharmacy has to give the insurance company back their money because the insurance company has already paid the pharmacy for that prescription, anticipating that the customer will pay their copay to complete the transaction. But since the customer never picked up that medication, the pharmacy has to give that money back to the insurance company because the medication was never picked up and the transaction was never complete. And again, the longest you can do that is 14 days. CVS goes 14 days. So they try to get the prescription picked up by the customer within 14 days. Other pharmacies, even though they can go 14 days, they use a different time period. I think Walgreens will only keep the medication out for 7 days before they reverse it. And I think Walmart does 10 days, but it's up to that particular company. So once the medication has been reversed out, it's called a RTS, or return to stock. This is after prescriptions have not been picked up for 14 days. They must be removed from the waiting bin, placed back on the shelf, relabeled, and you must reverse the insurance claim. This must be done to prevent insurance fraud. Because if you never gave the insurance company money, reversed it back out, you're keeping money that the insurance company has paid the pharmacy and that the person or the customer has never picked up. So be familiar with those terms, please. Here's another phenomenon that I want you to be familiar with. It's called off-label use, and it's very controversial and very tricky, but very common nowadays. So off-label use is once you become familiar with prescription medications, you will fill a few prescriptions that will actually baffle or confuse you because you'll be unaware of the off-brand use, and you must think that the doctor has made a mistake. So off-brand use is still very controversial, but it's still legal in the United States. The decision to prescribe a drug off-label is usually based on a review of scientific studies of the drug for different indications. And again, like I said, this is a very controversial law that or practice that allows. One thing that you may have heard of this year that was used for off-label use, and you may have heard the president talk about it many times, was hydroxychloroquine for COVID. Hydroxychloroquine is a drug to treat either two things by FDA standards. It treats malaria and it also treats lupus. One of those two indications is what it's FDA approved for. So again, you may have heard the drug hydroxychloroquine a lot this year, especially during the beginning of COVID. Okay, so it treats, it got approved by the FDA to treat malaria, and it got approved to treat lupus, which are two immune disorders. Now, when I say off-label use, sometimes drugs that are indicated for other things or FDA approved for other items, they have either side effects or other effects that help other medications. So in the terms of when I talked about hydroxychloroquine, there were studies that the medication helped people who had COVID. It helped them recover a lot better. But hydroxychloroquine is not FDA approved for COVID. So remember, when drugs get to the market, you have to do lots and lots of studies of that drug on a particular population. So when hydroxychloroquine was placed on the market, COVID was nowhere around, because hydroxychloroquine has been around for decades, but it was basically tested on people who had lupus or malaria, and it helps with those two disease states. But it has never been tested with COVID, because COVID is new. But sometimes drugs that are new or disease states that are new, sometimes some drugs that are already around can help in those situations. So some studies were showing that hydroxychloroquine helped people recover who had COVID, and that's a off-label use, because hydroxychloroquine has never been tested on people with COVID, because when the drug came out, COVID was nowhere in existence. And another popular one that most of you know about, that I'm about to tell you, that has off-label use is this one that you're all familiar with. If somebody was to tell the average person, I have trouble sleeping at night and I need to take a medication over the counter that will help me sleep, 9 out of 10 people will say, take Benadryl or diphenhydramine, which is Benadryl. Now, Benadryl is FDA approved for allergies. Benadryl is an antihistamine. It helps you with itching. It helps if you have hives. It helps if you have an allergic breakout. It's an antihistamine. It is not, or ever has been approved for sleep. It is not technically a sleep or hypnotic medication. However, Benadryl is an antihistamine that when you take it causes extreme drowsiness. That's why it is off-label use for sleep. So sometimes companies can market a drug with side effects for off-label use, and Benadryl is one popular one. More people probably use it to sleep than they use it as a antihistamine or allergy medication, because again, it causes extreme drowsiness when you take it and it puts you to sleep. But it was never FDA approved for sleep. Never. It's not like Unisom or Sominex, which are FDA approved for sleep, but it was FDA approved as an antihistamine, but since the side effect causes sleep, the off-label use is sleep. And there's a lot of prescription medications like this. So some doctors prescribe a drug off-label as a last resort. So in other cases, the scientific evidence that the drug may be effective for other conditions is so strong and overwhelming that the drug is routinely prescribed for that indication, even though it has not been approved for that use. And that goes back to the hydroxychloroquine. Since the effects of it with people with COVID was recovering, some doctors prescribe it. but it's off-label since it's not FDA approved for it. So a drug, and I want you to know this, a drug company cannot market or promote an off-label use, but the FDA currently allows physicians to prescribe off-label. Yes, I know it makes no sense. So basically what this is saying is that you will never ever see a commercial for Benadryl advertised for sleep because it's not FDA approved for sleep. You'll see it advertised for allergies, but it will never ever be advertised for sleep, even though it works to put you to sleep because there's never been FDA approved for sleep. So you cannot, a drug company cannot market a drug for off-label use. It's illegal. And here's just a list of some off-label meds. Some of them you may be familiar with. Bupropion, when sold under the brand name Wellbutrin, is indicated for depression. So this is a popular depression medication, but it's also sold as a smoking cessation drug. So this is a drug that helps you quit smoking under the name Zyban. Zyban is still bupropion. What happened was when they were doing tests on Wellbutrin for depression, some of the people who were depressed were reporting that they didn't have the urge to smoke anymore if they were smokers. So then it got marketed under Zyban to help you stop sleeping. This one you may not know, but it's definitely true. Viagra, when you think of Viagra, you think of a drug used for ED or erectile dysfunction. But believe it or not, there are some doctors who prescribe it for women, and they use it for women who have issues with infertility. And infertility is the inability to get pregnant. But off-label, if a woman takes Viagra, she'll get more fertile and be easier to get pregnant. And it is prescribed for that sometimes off-label. There's a drug called Flomax. The generic name is tamsulosin. I believe that's a top 100 drug. Is used to treat with a condition called BPH. This stands for, the B stands for benign. The P stands for prostatic or prostate. The H stands for hyperplasia. This is basically a prostate issue in men. Women do not have prostates. So prostate is one of the organs that helps men urinate properly. It's connected to the bladder, and usually when men turn 40, it starts to malfunction, and they need a prostate medication. Again, women do not have prostates, so they would have no need for this medication, but this can be used in women to treat kidney stones. Women get kidney stones way more than men, and this drug is effective in treating that off-label. There's another one called Zoloft, antidepressant medication, off-label, premature ejaculation. Hope I don't have to explain that. And if I do, just send me a text of what that treats. Another drug, and there's lots of them, spironolactone. This is a diuretic to help with congestive heart failure. That's what CHF stands for. But it also has acne properties off-label and can be used to remove facial hair. Transgender men that are transitioning into a female, they often get prescriptions for this because obviously if you're a male, transgender male, and you're trying to transition to a female, you don't want any facial hair on you. You want the mustache gone. You don't want no evidence of a beard because you're trying to transition to a female, and obviously majority of females don't have facial hair. This drug prevents, it removes facial hair, and it prevents it from regrowing. So it's used a lot for that issue. This is a real popular one, gabapentin. Gabapentin is originally FDA approved for seizure. This one is postherpetic neuralgia. This is a condition that you get if you have shingles. Shingles is one of the herpes type virus, not the sexually transmitted one, but it's a different type. But it's mainly used for pain associated with that condition and seizures. But off-label use, it has a lot of indication. Off-label is used for bipolar disorder. This is when you have different mood disorders. It goes up and down. Essential tremors, there's a lot of shaking in your body. Hot flashes, this is when women go through menopause. Migraine prophylaxis, so this drug helps when you got a migraine coming on. Neuropathic pain, so this is just pain dealing with your nerves. Phantom limb syndrome is when one part of your either your leg or your arm is numb all the time. Same thing with restless leg syndrome is another disorder where usually happens at bedtime where your leg shakes and there's a lot of pain in your legs and your lower extremities and your toes and your feet. So um, 7 other off-label use. Okay, so a lot of drugs have off-label use, and these are some other ones. You have stimulants such as amphetamine or Ritalin. This is indicated for attention deficit disorder, known as ADD or ADHD. But this is often prescribed for adults as well. So usually it calms down children, but when adults are on it, it makes them concentrate better. So it just depends on who's taking it or what it actually does. So again, these are your stimulants. They have different off-label use. Also, stimulants are also an appetite depressant. So people trying to lose weight will try to get a prescription for like Adderall, because usually with a stimulant, doesn't matter which one, you're normally eating one time a day. And if you're eating one time a day, you're going to likely lose weight. And a little FYI information here. If you look at the word stimulants and you look at this drug, amphetamine, then you look at this one, methylphenidate, which is Ritalin, amphetamine is Adderall. And if I ask you what major drug is this similar to with a similar design, what should come to your mind is methamphetamine, which is crystal meth, which is a stimulant. They're in the same family, not the same exact drug, but the same type of drug. They're both stimulants. And if you know people who use methamphetamine or crystal meth, they tend to lose weight over time because they rarely eat. And the other thing, remember, stimulant actually keeps you up a long time. And people who are addicted to crystal meth, ice, crank, or whatever they call it these days, they've been known to stay up literally 2 and 3 days straight because it's a stimulant, depending on how heavy they are on there. And these are just some other ones, doxapan. You can read what it says here, carbamazepine, different indications. And if you just Google what are some off-label prescription meds, you're going to get a whole list of them. Very popular. This is another popular drug, metformin. When you think of metformin, used to treat diabetes, but off-label, it can make you lose weight. So again, it's out there and it's very, very popular. Finally, the last thing I want to talk about that I want you to get familiar with, and I'll send you a copy of what this actually looks like on paper. You got DEA 222 forms, and the PTCB usually likes to ask questions about 3 of them. And it's very simple. So DEA 222 form are needed to order C2s. So C3s, C4s, C5s, and everything else can be ordered online, okay? Not C2s. C2s need a special form that has to be ordered on this, and the form number is 222. So sometimes in the PTCB, they may ask simply, what forms are needed to order C2s? The answer is 222, DEA 222. Okay, you only need this for C2s. C3s, C4s, C5s can be ordered online. Like every other drug, you don't need a special form to order a C3, a C4, a C5, just C2s. Also, I want you to know that the 222 form, which I'll send you a little description of, they're actually 3 copies in one. And I want you to be familiar with this. So the actual form has 3 different pages. Each page is color coded, but they have a special special area where they go. The first copy, which is the copy at the top, is brown, and it goes to the supplier. So it goes to the person that you're ordering the drug from. The middle copy is green, and it goes to the DEA office. So the DEA office gets a copy of every C2 that's ordered from any pharmacy. Then there's a blue copy. This one remains at the pharmacy for the pharmacy records. So again, the first copy is brown, and that goes to the company or the warehouse that you're ordering your medication from. So when they get it, they're going to have a brown copy and a green copy. Because remember, the blue one's at the pharmacy. So remember, it starts at the pharmacy. So the pharmacy fills one out and keeps the blue form at the pharmacy for their records. Then what's left is the brown and the green. The brown goes to the supplier. That's the company that you order it from, and it's the first copy. When the warehouse gets your order, so this is the company that's going to actually ship you the meds, they keep the brown copy, and what's left is the green copy. So they're going to fill out what they send you, and once it's completed, they're going to send the green copy to the DEA, and the DEA keeps the green copy. So be familiar with the colors and where they actually go. Then you have the DEA 106. Know that this is used for lost or stolen C2s. So if somebody robs the pharmacy and takes some C2s, you fill out a DEA 106 right away, or right when you know that the theft or loss has occurred. Or if you order some C2s and they never show up and it's considered lost in transit, you immediately fill out a DEA 106. Then finally, the last number to remember is the DEA 41. So the DEA 41 is for destruction of C2s. Other medications like C3s, C4s, C5s, there are companies that you can send that back to that actually can get rid of those medications or destroy them, or you can actually return those. But C2s are a little different. C2s have to be destroyed by the DEA. And once you have some C2s, whether they have been damaged or whether they just expired, you request a DEA 41 and you place the C2s that are needed for destruction, send them to the DEA. The DEA will send you a box and a bag that you need to seal, and then you place the meds in there, and then the DEA destroys those C2s. So just remember, to order, just remember these three: the 222, the 106, the 41. 222 orders C2s. 106 is if your C2s are lost or stolen. 41 is when your C2s are expired or damaged and they have to be destroyed. You fill out a DEA 41. And that concludes everything. Any questions about this lecture, just notify me, and I will be glad to go over it. Thank you, and have a great day.